The U.S. Revenant drifted silently in the docking bay of Orion 7, its hull scared and rusted. It was a joke among the fleet, a relic from an era long forgotten. Once a proud warship, now nothing more than a floating embarrassment handed to the humans as an insult. Captain Elias Voss stood on the observation deck, arms crossed, staring at the vessel he was supposed to command. He could hear the laughter from the alien officers nearby. They actually expect the humans to fight in that thing. One alien snickered. It won't last a single battle. Scrap metal flies better than that ship. Another added. Elias clenched his jaw but said nothing. He had learned long ago that words meant little in the face of mockery. Only actions mattered. Behind him, his second-in-command, Ross Carter, whistled low. "Damn, Cap. They really gave us a piece of junk." Elias sighed. "It's still a ship, and it's ours." Ross smirked. "Barely. I bet even pirates wouldn't take it for free." At that moment, the doors slid open, and Mara Lynn, the chief engineer, stormed in, grease smeared on her uniform. "Captain, I've seen garbage dumps in better condition than that thing." Elias turned to her. "Can we fix it?" Mara hesitated. "Fix it? Maybe. But winning battles with it, that's a whole different story." The insult. The humans had fought hard for a place in the Galactic Union fleet, proving themselves time and again in combat. Yet, when the Union finally assigned them a warship, it was this, a forgotten wreck. The message was clear. Humans didn't belong in their war. Admiral Cal Virex, a high-ranking Union officer, stood on the command deck overlooking the humans. His reptilian features curled into a sneer. "Captain Voss, consider this a test. If your people can make something of this, well, let's just say we'll be very surprised." Laughter erupted from the other Union officers. Elias kept his expression neutral. He had no intention of giving them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Instead, he saluted sharply. "We accept the challenge, Admiral." Cale chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure you do." As Elias and his crew boarded the Revenant, the doors sealed behind them. The laughter faded, replaced by the cold silence of the ship's interior. A broken ship. The inside of the Revenant was just as bad as the outside. Flickering lights, exposed wires, leaking pipes. Half the systems were offline, and the main engines barely responded. Ross kicked a loose panel. "This thing is one step away from becoming space debris." Mara checked her datapad. Weapons systems, dead. Shields, non-functional. Power core, barely holding together. This ship isn't just old. It's been deliberately gutted. Elias frowned. "Deliberately?" Mara nodded. "Yeah, someone didn't just neglect this ship. They made sure it would never fight again." A heavy silence filled the room. Ross exhaled. "They didn't just give us junk. They gave us a death sentence. A hidden secret." Despite the odds, Elias refused to accept defeat. He walked to the command console and activated what little power remained. The main screen flickered, static distorting the image. Then, something strange happened. A deep, robotic voice echoed through the ship. "Operational systems compromised. Emergency protocols active." Mara's eyes widened. "Wait, did that sound like an eye?" Ross blinked. "I thought this ship didn't have one." Elias stared at the screen. The data scrolling across it didn't match Union systems. It was something older. Mara ran her fingers over the controls. "This isn't standard Union tech. This ship has something else inside it." Ross leaned closer. "Something the Union didn't want us to find." Elias smirked. "Then let's find out what they were trying to hide." For the first time since receiving the ship, he felt something other than anger or humiliation. He felt curiosity and a spark of hope. The dim glow of the U.S. Revenant's flickering lights cast eerie shadows along the metal corridors. The ship groaned like a wounded beast, its systems barely holding together. Yet, something had stirred, something hidden. Captain Elias Voss stood at the central command console, his fingers hovering over the cracked screen. The robotic voice they had heard moments ago still echoed in his mind. Operational systems compromised. Emergency protocols active. Marilyn, the chief engineer, worked furiously, her eyes darting across the failing data streams. This doesn't make sense. The Revenant's AI core should be dead, but something's still running. Ross Carter, the second in command, leaned against a rusted console, arms crossed. "You're telling me this junk heap is talking to us?" Mara glanced at him. "Not just talking. It's waking up." Elias pressed a few keys, activating a deeper system scan. The ship's holographic interface flickered to life. A distorted figure emerged, a humanoid silhouette glitching in and out. Designation: Revenant. Status: compromised. Awaiting command. Elias's eyes narrowed. "You're the ship's eye." The figure's voice was mechanical, yet laced with something old. "I was, before they buried me." A shiver ran down Mura's spine. "Buried you." The AI flickered, as if struggling to stay active. "They feared me. So they stripped me down. But they failed to erase me." Ross exhaled. "Okay, that's creepy as hell." Elias leaned forward. "Who are they?" For a moment, the ship was silent. Then the AI's voice lowered. "The Union. A dangerous secret." Mara's fingers froze over the controls. "The Union. Try to erase you." The AI's form glitched violently. "This vessel was never meant to exist, but you have reactivated me. Now, I remember." Elias exchanged a glance with Ross. The Union had handed them this ship as an insult, but they had unknowingly given them something far more valuable: a secret weapon. Ross rubbed his chin. "So let me get this straight. They gave us this death trap because they thought it was useless, but it's actually hiding something powerful." Mara nodded, her eyes gleaming. "Not just powerful. If the Union went this far to shut it down, then whatever's inside this ship is dangerous." Elias's lips curled into a small smile. "Then we're sitting on a time bomb." The first clue. The AI's voice broke through their thoughts. Primary systems offline. Weapons dormant. Core power at 12%. Mara cursed under her breath. That explains why everything is barely holding together. Elias crossed his arms. "How do we bring you back to full power?" The AI hesitated. "Reactor core needs reboot, but external interference detected. Warning: hostile presence near this sector." Ross groaned. "Of course, because things weren't bad enough already." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Who?" The AI's next words sent ice through their veins. "Union patrol ship, approaching." Mara's hands clenched. "Damn it. If they find out we've activated this thing." Elias didn't let her finish. "Then we'll make sure they don't report back." Ross smirked. "You're saying we fight in this wreck?" Elias turned back to the AI. "You said your weapons were offline. How long to bring them back?" The AI flickered. "Weapons restricted, but alternative methods available." Elias grinned. "Then let's get creative." The Revenant had been discarded as useless, but now it was awake, and it was about to make its first move. The U.S. Revenant drifted in the cold abyss of space, a ghost of a ship, silent, battered, and forgotten. But deep within its rusted frame, something had changed. The AI was awake, and the enemy was coming. On the bridge, Captain Elias Voss clenched his jaw, eyes locked onto the flickering radar. The Union patrol ship had entered scanning range. "They're coming in fast," Ross muttered, adjusting his worn-out combat vest. "Probably thinking we're just floating debris." Marilyn, hands moving rapidly across the console, hissed under her breath. "Weapons are still locked down. We don't have the firepower to take them head-on." Elias glanced at the ship's AI projection, a flickering humanoid figure, barely stable. You said alternative methods earlier. What did you mean? The AI's voice was cold. They disabled my primary systems, but they did not erase my memory. Mara's brow furrowed. What memory? A blueprint flashed across the screen, an unknown energy grid hidden within the ship's decaying hull. The Union had tried to erase it, but they had failed. Ross whistled. That looks like an EMP field. Mara's eyes widened. Not just any EMP. If this is what I think it is, we're sitting on a pulse weapon strong enough to fry an entire fleet. Elias's lips curled into a smirk. Then let's see if it still works. The bait. The Union patrol ship Praxis 9 was a sleek, well-armed vessel, nothing like the hunk of junk that was the Revenant. They were coming in confident, their weapons unarmed. After all, why waste energy on a dead wreck? Inside the Revenant, the crew held their breath. Elias gave the order. Cut all external power. Make them think we're dead. The ship went dark. The Revenant became silent, blending into the void. The Praxis 9 slowed, scanning for any activity. Ross tapped his weapon. If this doesn't work, I hope you've got a plan B. Mara whispered, just a little closer. The enemy ship moved into position. The AI's voice echoed through the bridge. Now, the trap is sprung. A deep hum rumbled through the Revenant's core. The hidden EMP pulse, the last remnant of the ship's erased past, activated. A shockwave erupted from the ship's hull, invisible but devastating. The Praxis 9's lights flickered violently. Sparks burst from their control panels. Their engines whined in protest, then died. Ross let out a short laugh. We got him. Elias wasn't celebrating yet. What's their status? Mara scanned the readings. Weapons offline. Shields down. They're floating dead. She turned to Elias, eyes burning with realization. We have an opening. Elias nodded. Then we board them. Ross grinned, already loading his rifle. Now this is getting fun. The U.S. Revenant, once discarded and mocked, had just claimed its first kill. And this was only the beginning. The Union patrol ship, Praxis 9, floated lifelessly in the void, its systems fried by the Revenant's hidden EMP pulse. Inside the ship, chaos erupted as officers scrambled to regain control, their voices panicked, their screens black. Meanwhile, aboard the U.S. Revenant, Captain Elias Voss stood tall, his expression unreadable. They had just pulled off the impossible. A rusted-out wreck had crippled a fully armed Union vessel. Now, it was time to strike back. The boarding party. Marilyn worked fast, scanning the Praxis 9 for vulnerabilities. They still have backup power, but weapons and shields are completely fried. If we move now, they won't be able to stop us. Ross grinned, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Good. Let's pay them a visit. Elias nodded. No killing unless necessary. We take what we need. Data, weapons, supplies. And if they resist, his voice hardened, they'll learn what it means to underestimate us. The airlock hissed as the Revenant's docking bridge extended, locking onto the Praxis 9. A moment later, the doors slid open, and the team stormed inside. The corridors were dark, emergency lights flickering. The Union crew had no time to mount a proper defense. The first guard they encountered raised his weapon, but Ross knocked him out cold before he could even fire. Mara hacked into a control panel, bypassing security protocols in seconds. We're in, heading to the bridge now. Elias led the way, pulse steady. This was their moment. Face to face with the enemy. When they reached the Praxis 9's bridge, the Union captain, Lieutenant Commander Durek Rowe, was waiting. He was unarmed, his hands raised, but his eyes burned with rage. You don't know what you're doing, Rowe spat. The Union will come for you. Elias stepped forward, unshaken. They already did. They left us to die. They took our ship, erased its history, and called it scrap. He leaned in. But now, It's back, and it just took you down. Mara pulled data from the ship's computers, her eyes widening. Captain, you need to see this. A holographic map flickered to life. It showed a Union fleet, dozens of warships, moving toward a classified location. Ross frowned. That's a full assault force. Where are they going? Mara's voice was grim. They're heading for the last human stronghold in this sector. Silence filled the bridge. Then Elias spoke, his voice cold as steel. Then we're not done yet. The Revenant wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. It was fighting for humanity. The U.S. Revenant disengaged from the crippled Praxis 9, its engines roaring to life. The stolen Union data had revealed a terrifying truth. The fleet wasn't hunting them. It was heading straight for humanity's last stronghold. Captain Elias Voss gripped the command rail, eyes locked on the holographic display. How long until they reached the colony? Mara Lynn, still breathless from the boarding mission, worked the controls. At their current speed? 3 days. But if we take a shortcut through the Sargas Rift, we might intercept them in 2. Ross scoffed. Sargas Rift. That place is a damn graveyard. Half the ships that enter never come out. Elias turned to him, his expression unyielding. Then we'll be the ones who do. A desperate gamble. The Sargas Rift was a massive expanse of twisted space-time, a graveyard of lost ships and unstable wormholes. Few dared cross it, and even the Union avoided it. But the Revenant wasn't like other ships. Mara rerouted power to the modified warp core. Engines are stable, but the Rift's gravitational surges could tear us apart if we're not careful. Ross smirked, strapping in. Careful? That's not really our style. Elias nodded. Take us in. The ship lurched forward, vanishing into the Rift's swirling abyss. The shadows within. Inside the Rift, sensors failed. Distorted readings flickered across the monitors. Mara cursed under her breath. There's something here. Elias' gut twisted. Define something. Unknown signals. No clear source. Could be wreckage, or something else. A sudden thud echoed through the ship. Ross grabbed his rifle. We're not alone. Emergency lights flickered as the ship shook. Then, from the darkness, something moved. A shadow drifting past the viewport, watching. The Revenant had entered something else's territory. And whatever it was, it had just noticed them. The U.S. Revenant drifted through the Sargas Rift, surrounded by swirling debris and ghostly wreckage from ships lost ages ago. The shadows outside seemed to move, shifting unnaturally. Inside, alarms blared. Something's locking onto us. Mara shouted, hands flying across the controls. I can't get a reading. No known signature. Captain Elias Voss gritted his teeth. Shields up. Full power to engines. Ross checked the viewport. Captain, we got a problem. From the Rift's depths, a massive, jagged structure emerged. It was neither ship nor asteroid. It was something ancient, something alive. And it was hungry. Trapped in the Rift. The Revenant's thrusters fired, but the ship barely moved. Something had lashed onto it, pulling it deeper into the Rift. The hull groaned under the pressure. Mara's voice was tense. There's some kind of field around us. It's distorting gravity. Ross slammed a fresh battery into his rifle. So what? We're caught in an alien spider web. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then we cut ourselves free. The struggle for escape. Mara rerouted power to the weapons. Firing torpedoes. The ship shook as 2 torpedoes launched, streaking toward the strange structure. They exploded on impact. But the thing didn't even flinch. Instead, a pulse of dark energy rippled outward, shorting out the Revenant's lights. The ship plunged into darkness. And then, they heard it. A deep, unnatural whisper echoed through the ship's comms. You should not be here. Ross's knuckles turned white on his rifle. Did anyone else hear that? Mara's voice trembled. That wasn't interference. Something is talking to us. Elias exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. Whatever this thing is, it wants us dead. He turned toward Mara. Can you overload the warp core? Just enough to destabilize the gravity field. She hesitated. That's risky. We could tear ourselves apart. Elias' voice was firm. Better than staying here. She nodded. Okay, rerouting power now. The ship hummed violently, the core building to a dangerous level. The Revenant shook as reality itself distorted around it. Then, a blinding explosion tore through the rift. Breaking free, the Revenant spun uncontrollably, the force hurling it out of the rift's grasp. Systems flickered back online, alarms screeching. We're out. Mara gasped, stabilizing their course. Elias exhaled in relief, set a course for the Union fleet. Ross shook his head. What the hell was that thing? Mara swallowed hard. I don't know, but I don't think we destroyed it. Elias stared at the rift, now silent and still. Something ancient had just awakened, and the Revenant had been its first visitor in a long, long time. The U.S. Revenant roared out of the Sargas rift, battle-scared but intact. Inside the command deck, Captain Elias Voss steadied himself as systems came back online. Status, he demanded. Mara Lynn wiped sweat from her brow. Engines holding. Shields at 40%. That thing in the rift isn't following. Ross let out a breath. Good. Let's never go back. But there was no time to rest. The Union Armada was still out there, and it was about to wipe out the last human colony. The enemy awaits. On the holoscreen, the Union flagship, Dominion, loomed like a fortress in space, leading a fleet of warships toward the colony. Elias clenched his jaw. We won't get another chance. We stopped them here. Mara tapped the controls. We still have a few surprises left. The Revenant wasn't just a stolen ship anymore. It was a weapon. And it was time to unleash it. The ambush. The Revenant burst forward, shields crackling as it cut through the void. The enemy fleet turned, scanning it like a stray insect. Then, they opened fire. The space around the Revenant lit up with plasma bolts and missile barrages. Ross grinned. Oh, they're mad. Mara's fingers danced across the controls. Let's make them furious. She activated the stealth plating, a trick stolen from the rift. The Revenant vanished from sensors, slipping through enemy fire. A heartbeat later, its plasma cannons erupted. The nearest Union destroyer detonated, splitting in two. Panic spread through the fleet. Their formations are breaking. Mara shouted. Elias seized the moment. Target the Dominion. One shot, one chance. The Union flagship was a monster, twice the size of the Revenant, bristling with weapons. A head-on fight was suicide. Elias had a different plan. He aimed the Revenant's experimental gravlance, a weapon stolen from the Union and modified with rift technology. Mara hesitated. We've never fired this at full power. Elias' voice was cold. Then let's see what it can do. The gravlance charged, energy crackling like a storm. The Dominion turned, its weapons locking on. But it was too late. The Revenant fired. A shockwave of pure energy ripped through space, warping gravity itself. The Dominion buckled, its armor peeling away like paper. Then, it imploded. The once mighty Union flagship was gone. The rest of the fleet, scattered, leaderless, defeated. The legend begins. Silence fell over the battlefield. Ross let out a breath. Did we just win? Mara laughed, exhaustion in her voice. I think we did. Elias watched as the surviving Union ships fled, leaving the colony untouched. The Revenant had gone from a scrap heap to the deadliest ship in the galaxy. And now, the Union would fear humanity. For the first time ever.